To another one of our QuaranSTREAMs answers for COVID-19. As always, I am excited to bring on a number of guests that we'll hear from today in just a bit. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so you may have noticed many of us are wearing green, and we hope that you speak to your family and think about the ways that you can support yourself and others during this time. Especially given that AP exams are happening, students who are going through that, we are thinking about you and hope that you make sure you take care of yourself and utilize the resources we'll be sharing today to do so. Fun note here, because humor is a good tool for mental health. My family and I have finally replaced our fire alarm battery, so you will not be hearing the chirping during this call. Thank you to the many people who brought that to my attention. For those of you who want to be reminded of our sessions every week, go ahead and text to 81010, the @ QUARANSTR, that's for QuaranSTREAM, and we'll ping you reminders before each session. As always, we're on Thursdays and Sundays at 7 p.m. So without further ado, as always, I'm your member at large on the Fairfax County School Board, Abrar Omeish, and I'm thrilled today to be joined with...
I'm Kimberly Boateng, and I'm the student rep on the school board.
Hi, I'm Stacy Swan. I am a volunteer and board member with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
I'm Megan Souza. I'm the youth program coordinator at NAMI Northern Virginia.
Hi, I'm Kheira Bekkadja. I'm a junior at Edison High School, and I'm representing Our Minds Matter, and this is my brave today.
Hi, I'm Anastasia, and I'm also a junior at South Lakes High School, and today I'm representing South Lakes High School, as well as This Is My Brave and Our Minds Matter.
Hi, I'm Jada. I'm a sophomore at Woodson High School, and I'm here today to represent Our Minds Matter and This Is My Brave.
Excellent, and we're really excited to hear from them in just a bit after we go over our school system updates. So as you all may know, we have a number of board meetings scheduled for this week. It is a busy week. We have board meetings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Monday, we have a discussion and presentation from staff on the return to school plan. Many of you have been asking, and I think it's been a question at least in every session, about whether we're going to school, when we're going, if it's happening in the fall. You may have heard, of course, that the governor is phasing us out of social distancing. We have also been warning here in Fairfax County in particular that our cases are still exponentially rising. So we have to be cautious that that guidance does not mean we should be leaving our homes liberally. So then Monday, the superintendent and his team will be presenting options for the school system phasing out of social distancing, and the school board will consider and discuss those. If you are interested, be sure to tune in for tomorrow's meeting. There will also be a presentation of the Advanced Academic Programming Study. As many of you know, there have been a lot of questions and concerns about achievement gaps and disparities in access to our advanced academic programs. The school board before had commissioned an external group to study independently what the situation is, and they're going to be presenting their findings tomorrow. Tuesday is a budget hearing. What that means is basically if there's a program that you think we should have or that we don't, or if you think that funding should be allocated in a particular way this year for this coming cycle, be sure to come out and speak. You can sign up on the fcps.edu page, of course, to go to school board, and then there's an opportunity to sign up to speak. You're also welcome to call the school board directly, and that number is on the FCPS website. Feel free to ask in the Q&A if you want more details on that. But I highly encourage you all. We already have 16 speakers signed up, and the budget this year is particularly important to pay attention to because of the challenges to the economy with COVID. So if you really believe you want to see a program included, or if there's something that's going to be an important consideration as we move into schooling in the fall, be sure to come out. Come out virtually, of course. So you could sign up with a video testimony or tune into the conversation. On Wednesday, the governance committee will be meeting. If that's of interest to you, you're welcome to attend. And then Thursday, we will have a public meeting on the budget, and the agenda will be updated in the coming days. The way you can follow up with follow on all these meetings is fcps.edu/TV. It's also broadcast on the school channels, and they are streamed live on that site. Of course, if you have any questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer them. Moving forward, in our county right now, as of Friday, we have had 301 new cases, which again emphasizes this idea that we are still going up the exponential curve and we have to be cautious. So far, we have had over 5,500 cases and over 230 deaths. So just keeping in mind here that we want to make sure we continue to distance and take the measures to ensure that our families are safe and healthy. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Kimberly to give us some additional updates.
Hi, so as of Friday, May 8th, FCPS has served a total of 796,021 meals. All curbside pickup and FCPS sites and popular locations are operating per usual, as there have been no changes since our last QuaranSTREAM. There were changes not too long ago, however, so be sure to check out the website to make sure you're up to date. And with technology, as of the 6th, there's been 17,489 laptops that's been distributed and 1,346 MiFi devices. You're muted.
Oh, well, yeah, so anyways, you can continue. Go ahead with the academic and special ed updates as well, and we'll transition into the second part of our conversation today.
All right, got you. So for academics, there were 17,046 sessions and 9,550 attendees on Friday. So the VHSL has officially canceled all spring sports for the rest of the school year. And for special education, the Fairfax County Special Education PTA SEPTA held a special education and distance learning Q&A with Dr. Brabrand and Teresa Johnson, who is the assistant superintendent of the Department of Special Services. So there should be, what's it called? A webinar that is accessible as a YouTube video. So make sure that you check that out. And yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Thanks, Kimberly.
Cool.
Yes, so for employee and personnel matters, you may have heard Dr. Duran, who is our Chief Equity Officer, has been announced as the Arlington County Superintendent. He will be starting after the school year, so we'll have him until June. Really sad news, but stay tuned for what is going to come out of the superintendent's office about potential restructuring or what the path forward is going to look like, particularly if you have reported to him directly. And in the meantime, those who were reporting to him can report to the superintendent. Seniors, as always, we're feeling the need to address the graduation situation for all of you. This past weekend, so yesterday, we had a call with the presidents of all the senior class councils from your high schools. So if you have ideas you want to put forth or concerns that you have as we move into a virtual situation, feel free to reach out to them, and they will be in constant contact with me, and I'll be sure to pass along the ideas that they have to the administration. Keep in mind, next week on Sunday, we're also going to have a live conversation with our senior leadership to engage you if you want to participate in that. So without further ado, really pleased here, of course, to have our guests. So we're going to go and hear from each of them a bit. If you have any questions about the school system in particular, ask them now, and we'll keep monitoring the feed. And then at the same time, while they're speaking, if you have questions that come up, feel free to send them in real time, and we'll address them as soon as they are finished. So without, moving ahead here, we have Stacy Swan from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm a volunteer and board member with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And our main office is in New York. And they have been putting a lot of resources together that is evidence-based and scientific-based. So AFSP is dedicated to saving lives and bringing hope to those affected by suicide. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they create a culture that's smart about mental health and engaging in the following core strategies. We funding scientific research, educating the public about mental health and suicide prevention, advocating for public policies in mental health and suicide prevention, supporting survivors of suicide loss and those affected by suicide. We have a lot of educational programs that is for students, high school students, parents, teachers, and just anyone in the community. We have an educational program called Talk Save Lives. It's an introduction to suicide prevention. It's a community-based presentation that covers the general scope of suicide, the research on prevention, and what people can do to get in to fight suicide. We have It's Real, College Students and Mental Health. Is a documentary featuring the stories of 6 college students from across the country, designed to raise awareness about mental health issues commonly experienced by students and encourage help seeking. We have More Than Sad. We have different modules for the More Than Sad, because we have the students, the parents, and the teachers modules. It teaches people how to recognize signs of depression and other mental health problems, how to initiate a healthy conversation about mental health, and how to take steps to seek help. We have a lot of great resources on our website to help people navigate their mental health through the COVID-19. We have advice and guidance, social sharing, public messages, resources, and programs. And you can find all that information at afsp.org/COVID-19. And we'll put a link up also. And American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we have chapters in all 50 states. So the chapter that serves where you're at, the National Capital Area, we're called the National Capital Area Chapter. So you can find us at afsp.org/NCAC. That's all I have.
Thank you, Stacy. And we'll ask a number of questions afterwards. But before that, we'll have Megan Souza from NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness in Northern Virginia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Souza. As I mentioned, I'm the youth program coordinator for NAMI Northern Virginia. As Abrar mentioned, NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are the local affiliate in Northern Virginia. So what we do is we provide education, support, and advocacy to people living with mental health conditions, as well as to family members, friends, and the community in general. So what this typically looks like is we have support groups, both for individuals who are living with a mental health condition, as well as family members, 2 different types of groups. We have classes that provide information on coping strategies and recovery skills, again, both for individuals and for family members. And we also have presentations that go into the community to educate the public on what mental health conditions look like, aimed at reducing stigma and helping people understand better. Right now, I want to talk about some of the shifts in our current programming. So we're very focused on maintaining some of those really important programs. So we've transitioned to virtual support groups for both individuals and family members. And those family support groups are available to parents, siblings, friends, spouses, partners. They're pretty open if you have a loved one who is struggling with a mental health condition. Those groups are available to you. And currently all of our virtual support groups are only open to people above 18, but we do have at least one support group that is specifically focused for parents of children under 18. So those virtual support groups are up and running. They're all on our website, on our calendar. In addition to that, we're working on getting some of our other programs up and running, but we've been very focused on sharing resources. So some of those resources we're sharing on our social media, some we have on our website. And I want to specifically talk about something that I've been working on recently is we're now sharing on Fridays, we call it our Family Focused Fridays. We're sharing resources specifically for parents of youth and for teens. So we'll be sharing those every Friday, different resources. Some of them right now are a lot related to COVID-19 and coping right now. But we will be continuing that, past the stay-at-home order and include resources outside of that as well. In addition, our helpline is open. Our helpline is available for anyone who would like help finding resources in the area. We have amazing volunteers that man the helpline. And while our helpline is not 24 hours, you can call at any time and leave a voicemail, and it should be returned within 48 hours. And I'll give you the number now, but I can also leave it in the chat so that you guys have that written down. But the number is 571-458-7310, and it's extension 102. You can also email the helpline and they'll get back to you again within 48 hours to help connect you to resources in the community. And that email is helpline@NAMI-nova.org. And I can include that as well. In addition, I just want to talk about some of the events that we have coming up. On May 20th, Wednesday, May 20th at 7 p.m., we're going to have a live discussion with a clinical psychologist specifically for parents of teens, talking about, some of the challenges that those parents are facing right now and ways to cope. And we're hoping beyond that to have one specifically for teens by teens and young adults. So all of that information will be on our website, on our Facebook page as well, NAMI Northern Virginia. But we're continuing to try to provide as much resources as possible and hopefully get our programs back up and running when we can.
Thank you, Megan. Certainly, looking forward to seeing what some of these events are as well, and potentially tuning in. Before we move into our presentation from students giving resources that are available to you on the school level and amongst your peers, I did want to kind of just talk about a little bit of what even mental health is, right? So let's start with that. When we refer to mental health, mental wellness, NAMI, your name's mental illness. So let's help us kind of convey to the audience here, what are we talking about exactly? Oftentimes, we think it's some kind of thing that is far removed or may not be so common, but experts now are telling us that the changes that we're seeing as a result of COVID, even just an adjustment to different lifestyles, is actually causing distress on all of us, and we should all be paying attention to our mental wellness. Megan, Stacy, students, anyone who wants to kind of chime in here to help the public understand what that is.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Again, at NAMI Northern Virginia, we're the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we focus on people with mental health conditions, but we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. When you skin your knee, when you have a headache, you can feel that pain. And so sometimes we get a little bit confused about mental health because it's not always the same kind of physical feeling, but mental health is very broad. From when we're worried about something, when we're nervous about a test, to feeling sad, from the loss of a friend or a loved one. We at NAMI Northern Virginia, we focus on when it reaches that point of a mental health condition. And that's a really tricky line. And there's all sorts of, diagnoses and stuff. But I think right now, a lot of people are struggling on a level of just, struggling with their mental health, meaning maybe they're more stressed than usual. And I think oftentimes mental health can have physical ways of manifesting itself. So you may not feel sad or nervous, but you may be having trouble sleeping or having trouble eating. Sometimes, nervousness manifests as a stomach ache in the simplest of ways. And so, I think there's a little bit of that. It ties really closely with physical health. And a lot of people might be experiencing new feelings that they haven't been before because of this isolation, because of this situation that we're in right now.
Yeah, one of the things that came to my attention, even with teen mental health, a lot of kids, sometimes are blamed for picking at their acne or doing that kind of thing, but sometimes anxiety itself manifests in those ways, right? Where you fidget or, so paying attention to those signs. So that actually transitions me well, and feel free, anyone who wants to comment on mental health more broadly, to the signs. you know, for our families, parents who may not necessarily be experts in this field, who may not have been exposed to cases or, you know, have a full understanding of the topic, how can they kind of see it in their own children? Or how can students or peers, young people, see it in each other? Or how can, yeah, where do we begin with the signs?
I think something that people don't really always realize is that you don't have to be diagnosed with a specific like mental health disorder or whatever you want to call it, because your mental health can change over time. It can change day to day even. You might not realize the things that are going on. So that's just one thing to think about.
I think we talk about there's 10 main warning signs, and I won't read them all out now, but you know, again, like I mentioned, some of them can be physical, that having trouble sleeping or sleeping too much is a big sign. Having trouble eating or not eating too much, sort of changes in personality, drastic mood changes, you know, isolating oneself in your room. And I think there's a challenge of, you know, feeling sad or withdrawn for two or more weeks is one of the biggest signs of depression, for example. But it's tough right now because most people are withdrawn or sad because they're isolated from friends, from family. And so I think, you know, paying extra attention to some of those other things, you know, the physical health things that are getting impacted is especially important. Changes in behavior, because it, you know, it to some extent makes sense for people to be sad or withdrawn due to the current situation, but keeping an eye on when it's getting too much. If you're not reaching out, if you're not having contact with people, or if it's impacting other parts of your life.
Yeah, and I just want to say mental health is not always visible. Like you can see someone with a cut or a scrape on their arm, and mental health is not always right in front of our eyes. So, you know, we can't be with our loved ones and visit our friends and stuff, but Zoom call, you know, get on the phone, check in with them. I mean, you can't go and visit, but at least, you know, it's a little, I don't know, at least we can still talk in video rather than not, you know, go a long time without seeing loved ones, and just, you know, check in with people. And it helps your own mental health too.
Yeah, I think it's very important for parents, especially, to be checking in with their children right now, just because I think that people our age are so used to being in such a social world, especially with social media. And so luckily for us, we can stay connected through things such as Instagram and Twitter and FaceTime and all of that. But oftentimes being on social media too much can get very toxic and could even worsen our mental health. So I would definitely say to a parent to check in and genuinely ask, how are they doing? Are they feeling isolated? Because I think a lot of kids our age, I know for myself especially, I'm very used to being surrounded by people and participating in a bunch of different activities. I'm not used to being at home this much and feeling so isolated. So I think it's really important to, one, maybe suggest a limit on social media, because I mean, I know social media affects people differently, but oftentimes it can get, it can leave people feeling very down about themselves and about their situation. So kind of be wary about how much time your kid might be spending on their phone and on different social media outlets, and just checking in with them, definitely.
And something else I want to add on to what you said, Anastasia and Stacy, is to also check on the people who you think they might be doing well, because oftentimes they're the ones who might be struggling the most.
Yeah, no, thank you. You know, it's certainly something that's incumbent on all of us at this point to first take care of ourselves, and then also be aware of how those around us and those who may not be checked in on, you know, whether it's senior citizens or neighbors who otherwise might be isolated or don't have family. So to Stacy's point, to kind of take that extra step. I wanted to also ask, so let's talk about the stigma. So, you know, it's one thing to not necessarily know how to kind of identify this, the technical aspects of it. And for our audience, I am refraining from asking very technical questions. I would encourage you to actually tune in to NAMI's session with the clinical psychologist that's coming up to ask particulars about the scientific piece, because we want to be mindful with mental health. You know, there's certainly resources we can share, best practices, signs that we can identify, all of these pieces of information that have been shared to us through experts. But at the same time, it is, given that it is a real, condition and can be something that requires expertise, we want to be mindful of those lines. But addressing the stigma. So outside of not knowing what it is, what are your thoughts in terms of the community's hesitance, right? So in calling it mental illness, or in feeling that it might be something's wrong with you, or sometimes, parents will give the response of, oh, just, man up, right? Or woman up. Or just, get over it, or, you're just sad or whatever. You just need to kind of take a breath of fresh air. Whereas maybe someone really is struggling with something that's very real. So I'd love to hear from you all, or I'll even speak for the religious community, just pray on it. This is kind of just something's possessed you, or it's in your head, So I'd love to hear from folks. I see Kimberly laughing, maybe you relate. But yeah, so I'd love to hear from y'all about your thoughts around the stigma, and maybe, what leads us to that, and how can we kind of break that down and better understand this for what it really is.
I think there's a stigma surrounding the fact that, I think the reason that there is a stigma around mental health is just because I think a lot of people associate mental health with mental illness automatically, and they just have a misunderstanding of what mental health is, which is why I'm really glad that we're clarifying what exactly it is, because mental health can take shape in like stress or something else, something a little bit more minor than being like hospitalized for mental illness. So there's just varying degrees of mental health, I would say. And I think that a lot of people are afraid that maybe their child just has an actual mental illness. And so I think that in order to eliminate the stigma, there also needs to be a lot of like self-education, and also just reaching out and learning about what mental health actually is and what they can do to help people who are struggling with mental health. So I think that the more we educate ourselves, the more we tell our stories, and the more we just share information with each other, the less of a stigma there will be. And yeah, that's kind of what I think, or where I think the stigma is derived from. It's just a misunderstanding of what mental health is.
Yeah, I completely agree with Anastasia. And I think that a lot of the times people will see mental health or poor mental health as being like a bad thing. And I think that people need to understand that it's just a challenge that people are facing, or it's not something that people can just get over. It's not always something that you can control. And I think that's also just something really important to know.
And I'd like to, add on with the mental illness piece as well, because again, that's our focus. And I think definitely people think of mental illness and mental health kind of combine them together. But I think people's view of mental illness is that it's something that, makes you incompetent or violent, or, incapable of functioning day to day. And, those are not accurate definitions of what mental illness is. And, we see in the media, perpetuating the idea that people with mental illness are violent. And I think that's another scary thing, is somebody hears the word mental illness and says, oh no, is this person violent? But we know that people with mental illness are more likely to be victims of violence. And I think, again, part of it's the media, part of it's just a lack of understanding of what that experience of living with a mental health condition is like. And so we prioritize sharing stories, people sharing, this is their experience, this is what I live with on a day-to-day basis, and this is what's real. And we know that, mental illness impacts everybody very differently, and there's so many different ways it manifests. And but you can't really understand it without hearing those stories from people sharing what it's actually like.
And I would just want to add, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but 1 out of every 5 people will have a mental health crisis in their lifetime, whether that just be depression, something minor as depression. But everyone at some point is going to struggle, and it doesn't mean that you're different. No one's no different than anyone else that struggles with a mental health crisis.
And I do want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was,
Go ahead, Megan, and then Kimberly.
Yeah, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I also think that we often view mental health and mental health conditions, mental illness, as an adult issue. And I think it's important for people to recognize that 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin by age 14. So, being a teen is a critical time for mental health. And teens do struggle with mental health conditions, in addition to the many teens that probably struggle with different parts of mental health in general. But teens can have mental illness as well. And I think, recognizing that is important for being able to be aware of it and address it.
I just want to hop in because something that Abrar said before kind of like struck for me, because I go to Lee High School, and I'm sure like I'd really be able to like say, my high school is one of the few high schools that doesn't have an Our Minds Matter chapter. And also my school is one of the more minority majority schools. And I wanted to speak to the stigma, because a lot of, especially like Black and brown communities, they tend to have the stigma, and especially immigrant communities, that say like, oh no, sometimes people think that like, oh yeah, mental illness and mental health, that's a white people thing. And it's unfortunate because it's, in often cases, there are certain types of generational traumas that are passed down. And these are populations and communities that are the ones who are like some of the most need of help. So like destigmatizing mental health and mental illness, I've been like trying to see like how are we able to kind of like talk about it more, because I know sometimes parents may not understand, they may not want to admit that maybe my child may need some extra support, some extra help, because maybe they felt like, oh, I've done this and I've just manned up, I just dealt with it. But having the understanding that everybody is different, and that like mental health is an important thing, especially in this day and age.
I wanted to speak on that too, because I can definitely relate to exactly what you said about like immigrants, because my family immigrated from Russia to here when I was around 5 years old. And so I think that a lot of children of immigrants, their parents have that mentality that you can get through anything, you have to push through it, like mental health issues are not existent, they're just not a thing. But I found personally, luckily my mom kind of transformed her opinion about mental health when I was in high school. So I realized that the faster that I reach out to people and the faster I seek help from others, the faster I can recover. Because I think that mental health is something that you can't deal with on your own, because that usually that ends up being you suppressing your emotions and then bottling them up forever and ever, and then they never get resolved. So the faster that you reach out, that you get help, 100% the faster you recover, because the people that you ask for help, they're not going to judge you. They're there to help you. They're not going to criticize you or think any less of you at all. I think that it's been pretty established in the mental health community, like among mental health organizations, that people who reach out are not weak at all. They're actually strong, and they're stronger than those who don't reach out. So yeah, I think the most important thing is just to provide a supportive community. And if you are a parent and you think that your child is struggling with mental health, I think that the most important thing to say is that you're there for them, and that you believe that they can get through it, and that you're willing to do anything to help connect them to resources, because the only way they can get through it is by being surrounded by a supportive group of people. That's just from my perspective.
Yeah. And then something else I want to add on is, I know per se, speaking from the Arab community, I feel like sometimes whenever we talk about mental health, or just in general how we're feeling, other people tend to view us as inferior. So I really think the only time we can actually like combat and end the stigma around mental health is when we start talking about it, like our physical health. Like, if you fell down or you have cramps, like you talk about it normally. So I feel like the time when we start talking about, oh, I'm feeling anxious, you know, that's a normal thing. Everybody has like a small, you know, level of anxiety. Everybody has the mental health. So I feel like the day when we start talking about it and we start normalizing it, that's when, you know, effective change will come.
Yeah, a lot of the stigma comes from people thinking, oh, if I have a mental health condition, this means that it makes me weak or something. And I just want to stress that it doesn't, and that the more you're speaking about it, the more you're telling people you need help, that's actually showing more strength in yourself, because you're taking it and you're like, you know, this is what I need. And to be able to tell someone exactly what you need, that's actually very hard to do. And I also just want to applaud people who are able to do that. And it's the people that are not, I don't want to say afraid, but the people who feel like they can't go and talk to someone. That's something we need to be working on just as a community, to create more of a space where people feel like they can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I, wanted to add to the piece that perhaps to move away from the stigma, internalizing the fact that it's actually something that impacts everyone, right? So it's not, those people who are weaker, as some of you mentioned, thinking that they're inferior somehow. And it's also not a label that someone, now that you are a depressed person, you are a person with anxiety, you are someone who has PTSD. We're kind of beyond those labels, and in the ebbs and flows of life, we are all susceptible to any of these challenges that will come forward and that we will experience as a result of all sorts of things, right? Like change of circumstance, some chemical imbalance, sometimes stresses, new, changes in life, death in a family, whatever it is that could kind of lead us to be in these conditions. And I think, breaking away from what that label defines us to be, or defines a person with that condition to be, that maybe socially we have this idea, a depressed person is like this, a suicidal person is XYZ, but instead it's in our own home, given whatever our history is, whatever our children have experienced, whatever maybe I have experienced in my own childhood that influences how I raise my own children. Trying to unpack all those things and recognize the trends that exist in us as human beings. If take a human being, put them in scenario X, and they will experience ABC, right? It's something very normal. It's something that changes in the course of our lifetimes. And to Anastasia's point, can be bottled up to just lead to kind of more damage or stress. Oftentimes, there's someone in our home who may be angry or may have let's say an unhealthy way of coping and processing their frustration. But it may very well be that they have cooped up so much of their own traumas and past that it's easy to set them off, right? That they process these emotions in such a way, or are a little fragile in that way. So point being, to all of the, the wonderful things that you all shared, it's important for us to kind of challenge our assumptions about how we think of mental health, and recognize that the more we educate ourselves and expose ourselves to understanding what this is, the more we'll see it for what it is, and the less it'll feel like something that is weak or is inferior or anything like that. And ultimately, we liberate ourselves this way. When we process these emotions, we open our hearts and make it so much easier to just experience life, and it makes us happier because we're not having to carry the immense weight of some of our traumas and challenges. So if anyone wants to add anything to that, I
want to be the stigma breaker. I look normal just like everyone else does that's on this call, and I suffer with a mental health illness. So I take medication every day, and you would never know that if I didn't tell you.
Thank you for your courage in sharing that.
Thank you for sharing that, Stacy. So something else I want to say is it's kind of really hard. It's a tough challenge to actually sit down with yourself and figuring out what am I feeling? What's happening to me? So I do know that from my experiences, it's a very tough thing to do. And also just to talk with your family or your society, especially if they're very especially if they have negative views about mental health. So I would say something that I learned the hard way is to surround yourself with people who are willing to work around mental health. I remember I attended last year a NAMI presentation, and they did a very fantastic job. and also the Our Minds Matter community and school counselors. Just surround yourself with people who want to help you, people who want to change the culture around mental health.
Yeah, people also just often assume like, oh, this person seems this one way, like, and I want to also just give credits to Stacy because I think that's great that she shared, and that actually has made me want to share. So, I mean, I've been struggling with clinical depression and anxiety for years now, but when I first didn't realize it, I mean, everyone thought, you know, I was like fine, and I mean, people still do. And so I think that's something just people don't realize. You know, you can put on a mask or you can seem one way, but it doesn't actually mean the exact same as what's going on the inside of someone.
I also wanted to go off of what Kheira was saying about surrounding yourself with supportive people, and I 100% agree with that. And I think that you should try your best to surround yourself with people who are supportive of what you're going through. However, I do think that there are some people who are not as privileged to be surrounded by people who are kind and supportive and understanding. And I think that, well, Northern Virginia, at least we come from a pretty privileged community. And I think that there are other people in the world that don't necessarily have the people surrounding them that we do or the resources. And I think that also, to an extent, it is a school's job to educate us about mental health, because I know, for one, I was privileged to enter a family that my mom is pretty educated about mental health and psychology, and she pushes me to also pursue self-growth and read about it and self-educate. But I think that there are other kids who end up struggling with mental health for so long just because they don't have it's not necessarily their fault. They simply don't have the resources, or they were never introduced to the topic of mental health or psychology or how to deal with mental health issues and coping mechanisms and all of that. So I think that because every kid is required to go to school, school should be the one place that provide us with the resources to educate ourselves about mental health, because I think mental health and emotional intelligence are just as important as history, math, language arts, everything. Because if we don't know how to deal with our emotions, there's no way that we can successfully pursue any of the other subjects and be happy and fulfilled and successful in life in the future. So I think that emotional intelligence education and mental health education is definitely something that our schools are lacking, which, I mean, is unfortunate to say, but I think that's the truth. I think that there are so many kids who are just in the dark about what mental health even is, and they might not even be aware that they're struggling simply because they were never given the opportunity to learn about it. So, yeah.
I want to just go off of that to share a resource from NAMI Northern Virginia. We do have a presentation called Ending the Silence. And this program, we do go often into classrooms, and it's a 50-minute presentation. It fits in a period, and it's given by two people with lived experience. So somebody, a young adult who is living with a mental health condition, as well as an adult or a parent of a teen who's living with a mental health condition. And we talk about some of those warning signs, you know, what it actually looks like to be struggling with your mental health and where to get help, what to do about it. And I think you're right, Anastasia. I think a lot of people don't have that information. And so we really try to, and, you know, it's only 50 minutes and, you know, it's better than nothing. But we try to provide some of that basic information just so people can say, wait a minute, I've been feeling that way, or wait a minute, that's happened to me. Maybe I should talk to somebody. And we actually have one now for parents and for school staff as well, that talk about, you know, ways to recognize it in children and teens, ways to recognize it in your students, because a lot of parents don't know that information either and don't have access to that information. And so if anyone is interested in that, please reach out to us, because we have fantastic presenters that, you know, they share their personal stories, but also share really great information that a lot of people should know, but might just not have access to. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would encourage, you know, folks to definitely take a look and see how they can further educate themselves, you know, to the point people don't even have a language for it. This whole idea of labeling emotions. I mean, if we all just sit with ourselves right now and think of what are we feeling, what are we experiencing, what are the influences around us that are impacting that, it's very difficult actually to begin to identify what those things are and to and that's kind of the step, the first step to be able to even know that you need help or that you, or what, you know, what to do about it. So I appreciate all these reflections and the resource you mentioned, Megan. I want to make sure we also have the opportunity to hear from some of our students who have put together a presentation for us about what resources are available, in particular to you all who are in school, despite the social distancing time. So with that, I'll let Kheira, Anastasia, and Jada give us a brief presentation, and we will take the public's questions right after that. So thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yes, okay. Go present. Okay, so I'm representing here today Our Minds Matter. And basically what Our Minds Matter does is we're a school-led club that works together with students, teachers, and staff to target the stigma around mental health by giving coping skills, resources, some self-empowerment. And so far during this quarantine, every Wednesday, they're doing virtual Wellness Wednesdays from 3 o'clock to 4 p.m. And basically what we try to do is we try to foster social connectedness. We have a chance to talk with other teens who are going through the same problem. They have groundbreaking, empowering speakers who share their stories and how they survived or what they're doing through COVID to help, cope with their mental health and how to stay productive. And overall, it's a really great time to connect with people. So if you're interested in learning more, there's the link. It's bit.ly/OMM meeting. And also if you follow the Our Minds Matter Instagram, they weekly post about it where you can also register online as well. And you can also check their website out, the Our Minds Matter website. And if you don't get a chance, they post their weekly recordings. So if you have time, you can listen to their previous recordings as well. And then I want to share this video. I hope it works. So Jada put together a quick video of tips and strategies to cope with mental health during these tough times. I hope it works.
Kheira, you may want to turn up the audio on your end to the maximum so that it's heard. Yeah.
No. It's 100.
I think I'm still unable to hear it.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear either.
So I have it on 100. It's like really loud.
If you want, you can check the video out. It's on the FCPS YouTube account as well as their Twitter and Instagram accounts. So you can, there's a whole series of wellness videos from multiple students in our county.
Kheira, did you mute yourself? I can't hear you anymore either.
No, I'm still I'm unmuted.
Okay, because if it's on a high volume and you're unmuted, we should be able to hear it, but I don't know.
Okay, do you want me to unmute and press play maybe?
Yeah, let's do that. Unmute yourself. Yeah, I guess it didn't work, but it's okay. We will work through these technical difficulties. Maybe we could show it at the end, but thanks, Jada.
I can also post the link on the Zoom, and then you guys can definitely check it out in your free time. Yep. Oh. Okay, so something else we wanted to share is I know this might be a very hard time for families, parents. So I want everyone to know that Fairfax County does have mental wellness consultations. So Abrar, is it okay if maybe you can share this with, I guess, everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been mentioning it in each of our live streams. So really appreciate highlighting this.
Yeah, so
tell them where to find it specifically, or else I can comment on that as well. Go ahead.
So actually, I don't know where we can find this. Is it the Fairfax County?
Yeah, so when you go to fcps.edu, you'll get that Corona update message. You want to click on FAQs, and you want to scroll all the way down. You'll see a section on mental health. And in that section, you'll see a link to the form, and this is the form. So go ahead, Kheira, thank you.
And it's also free, so it's accessible to anybody, anytime. So if you know anyone who's struggling, definitely share this with them. And then also, we also know during these times, substance abuse is not being, neglected. So if you know anyone, or if you're personally struggling, reach out to the abuse prevention specialist. And there's also a phone number here. And I think, is this also found on the Fairfax County website? So yeah, definitely check that out as well. Anastasia, if you want to talk about This Is My Brave.
Yep. So I'm an intern for This Is My Brave. I run their This Is My Brave Teens Instagram account, which is a platform that I share teens' mental health experiences. And I'm also the host of our new podcast that will be coming out in the coming weeks. It's related to mental health, so that'll be a great resource for students and adults as well to listen to during COVID-19, just because it's just another medium for people to receive mental health information. So This Is My Brave is a nonprofit organization that works to also erase the stigma of mental health through storytelling. What they do is provide a platform for people to share their mental health stories as the live performance. So they host events where people can audition to share their mental health stories through either a song, a dance, an essay, just various forms of performance art in front of a live audience. And basically their whole message is that storytelling can break the stigma. So obviously we cannot hold live events right now because of the whole social distancing situation. So they are going to be hosting a virtual event in October, I believe, for high school students. Actually, it's their first Fairfax County, well, they've actually expanded it to the DC metro area high school show. So they're going to be extending actually their audition deadline. So if parents watching this have any teen children who would like to audition, you can go ahead and find information on thisismybrave.org. And what they will do is they'll audition with their performance piece and then be able to perform it virtually in October. And yeah, so they also have an Instagram account. Their main one is This Is My Brave. And then again, for the teens, it's This Is My Brave Teens. And another resource that you can reach out to is To Write Love on Her Arms and the Trevor Project. So both of those nonprofits work to connect people with mental health resources like the text hotlines and other resources, like connecting them with other organizations that work to help people struggling with mental illness. So these are both really great resources for teens or adults. People of all ages are welcome. So yeah. Jada?
Yes, I just wanted to let you guys know. So the originally the This Is My Brave high school show was going to be in October, but it is moved to the end of August 30th. But their auditions are still open and they're still looking for people to try out. So if you know anyone, any teen who would want to try out, really please feel free to do that and contact Erin Gallagher. But you can find her email on the This Is My Brave website. I'm sure we could also give it to you if you need it.
Also check them out on Instagram. So if you guys are, on Instagram, that's where they post most of their updates as well.
We'll be editing the description right after this video with all the resources that folks are sharing so that you can access them longer term and know who to reach out to. Is that, Jada, was that everything?
I think we're still on Anastasia.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you guys for the presentation. You can go ahead and stop screen sharing.
Oh, sorry, no, okay, that was the end of.
Oh, okay,
I think that was the end of
yeah,
that slide. I think Anastasia, you can continue.
I already talked about To Write Love on Her Arms and the Trevor Project. I think we're just behind a couple slides. So we should be on slide
Oh, okay.
9
Okay,
by now.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Trevor Life, this one is for anyone who, is part of the LGBT community. If anybody, feels they want to, reach out, this is an awesome organization as well.
So I'm going, oh my God, okay. You can always text 741-741 to talk to a crisis counselor online if you ever need to. You don't have to actually be in a crisis. I think that's something that people really mix up, and they think, oh, if I'm not suicidal, if I don't have self-harm urges, then it means that I can't text this number, but you absolutely can, and you can do it 24/7 anytime. So if you ever need to, please don't hesitate to. And there's also a National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and that's the number 1-800-273-8255, and you can also call that whenever. And these are the contacts for Our Minds Matter, which is the mental health organization we've been talking about. And this is their website, their Instagram pages. And if you ever have any questions or want just more information, you can email Laura Beth at joshafoundation.org.
Yeah, I think this wraps us up. And if you're like a student who's listening and you don't have an Our Minds Matter club in your school, feel free to reach out to Laura Beth and they'll get you started as soon as possible. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing. Really important resources. We want to make sure, our students reach out, find the resources you need. To that point, I did want to kind of pose the question. Maybe I want to definitely rope in Stacy on this one as soon as she comes back. We're talking about mental health. There are a number of lifelines. Sometimes maybe the average person, maybe the difference between, needing that kind of immediate help or having maybe suicidal thoughts or being kind of really in a tough spot versus the kind of general wellness piece of this. So I'd love to hear, maybe Stacy, if you can comment a little bit on the distinctions, with suicide versus general mental health. Maybe if you want to comment in particular on what that is and the stigma around that, or why it's important for people to kind of look out for the signs. Anything you'd want to share on that note?
So people that struggle mentally does not always mean that you're going to attempt a suicide. And it does not mean that you're going to die by suicide. So when you see someone who's struggling mentally, you want to have that open, honest conversation. And you do want to ask, do you have a plan to kill yourself? Are you contemplating harming yourself? But just because someone's struggling mentally, don't assume that they're contemplating suicide. But at the same time, don't assume that they're okay, that they're just struggling mentally. You always want to be honest and ask them straight up. Don't beat around the bush. Just have an honest conversation and ask them if they're okay. Sit with them. Everyone who's struggling mentally doesn't mean that they are going to die by suicide. Suicide might be the furthest thing from their mind, and they just need a little extra support. They don't know how to get mental help. I didn't know how to get myself help. I went through a lot to get myself help. So a lot of people doesn't know how to do that. So just, if you know someone who's struggling, just talk to them, be honest, and just be their friends and be with them. But don't assume the worst, but don't ever think that they're just depressed or they're just having anxiety. They'll be okay tomorrow. And then tomorrow, it might not be okay. I don't know. Just don't assume, but just ask, honestly.
Yeah, no, the not having assumptions about any of this is really an important point. Megan, go ahead. I know you want to jump in here.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I mean, Stacy made a great point of just because somebody's struggling does not mean that they're, going to attempt suicide. But, and I think Jada mentioned this earlier, but you don't have to be in a crisis to reach out for help. Back when I was in high school, I was struggling with depression and anxiety, and I told myself, but, I not having any thoughts of harming myself and not having any thoughts of suicide, so I'm fine. Because I had seen other people who, were struggling with their mental health and also were, thinking about harming themselves. And it took me a very long time to reach out for help for that reason, and it did get worse. And it impacts, for me, it impacts other parts. I am not at that point, fortunately, but sometimes it prevents me from getting sleep, from doing work, which are also very important things for your life. And so that crisis or not, if you're struggling, you can reach out, and you should reach out, no matter how serious you feel it is. If you're feeling something, and it doesn't feel right, if you're hurting or struggling with something, that's enough reason to reach out.
And if you are struggling and you do reach out, it does not mean that you're going to be thrown into a psychiatric hospital. You're going to be admitted, never out. Like, just because you're struggling does not mean you're going to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize the importance of unconditional love in these circumstances, to friends, to your children. Sometimes there's a perception that suicide is a selfish thing, or, people just kind of take themselves away from their loved ones. But sometimes the mental headspace can be the most selfless thing, actually, and thinking that you want to rid these people of yourself. It's complex. And to Stacy's point, we should not make any assumptions. And make sure that we, again, show that unconditional love to all those around us, and pay attention to those signs that Megan talked about earlier, and folks isolating themselves, and particularly during this time. Did you want to
One thing I like to do
Yeah.
is when I go to the grocery store and I notice that the cashier doesn't make eye contact, I'm like, hi, how are you doing? We don't know what that person's going through, and that hi, how you doing could save their life.
Yeah, no, thank you, Stacy. Showing that kindness, being mindful. We don't know what people are going through, and always kind of trying to be a positive addition to people's day or their life, as opposed to the opposite. And we do that, and we make it easier for ourselves to do that by taking care of our own complexes, right? And to the point earlier, we talked about traumas and how traumas can impact us. I wanted to just try to outline what some of those are, because we talk about the word trauma can sound scary. Probably to the average person, you think of, I don't know, trauma surgery or like emergency situations. But trauma can be much softer, right? It can mean growing up in a home where there are a lot of loud noises. It can mean growing up in poverty when you don't have a stable source of nourishment or what you need, right? If anyone, Megan, I see you nodding. I don't know if you want to comment on this, but what are some of these things that we see impacting folks in that longer term way that the average person encounters that they may not realize impacts them and their mental health?
Yeah, trauma is so complex, and there's a lot that we don't know about it still, but what's considered a trauma to each person is very different, and every person responds differently to trauma. I'm not going to get into it too much, but we talk about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And so some of these things are what put people, at greater risk of having a traumatic response, greater risk of developing a mental health condition, of having health disparities later on. And, some of those things are poverty, abuse in the home, neglect, some of these things that we do consider people might recognize as trauma. But one thing I want to point out is, this current situation that we're experiencing will likely be traumatic to many people. Losses of life, especially for, healthcare workers, are experiencing trauma, but even, being isolated in your home, away from friends, losing, missing out on lots of experiences can be traumatic. And even just the fear of what's going on can, be considered a trauma. And I just, I want to make sure that we recognize that this situation can be traumatic to many people, and people having a trauma response to the current situation is not unlikely. But again, it's going to depend on each person and their reaction to it. And, that's another complicated thing of what determines that, but it's so individualized. But lots of things that maybe we don't consider to be traumatic for one person can be for another person.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, even, younger children, right? You touched on the point where we think of this in terms of adults more so, but young children who experience, their parent has an illness and they don't have the same opportunity for attachment anymore, or yeah, so many ways that we should be mindful of how, we're being impacted, but also how our own mental health is impacting those around us. Maybe as a final question here, I know we're kind of going over time, but this is such an important topic, and I'm glad to see the engagement. So I want to keep us going a little bit. Habits. So someone earlier mentioned coping habits. For beginners, I want to acknowledge y'all out there. It's totally fine not to even know what these words mean. That's why it's so important for us to educate ourselves and get to know what some of the language is around this, and the things to notice. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about healthy and unhealthy ways of coping with mental health stresses. Let's start with even defining what that is. So people, as a result of these stressors and what they're feeling, will resort to whatever behavior they end up kind of inclining towards. One of the first steps in self-awareness and being able to understand what, our mental health condition is to actually notice these steps, right? So maybe someone kind of stressed out and starts eating a lot of sugar. Add me to that category. So, that might not be something that you immediately notice the connection or the pattern that with stress, I, incline to sugar, or with stress, I incline to being more irritable. So I am more angry, right? Like whatever it might be. And then your inclination towards these behaviors may not always you may not notice that is actually a negative coping mechanism. So anyway, I wanted to open the floor. Let's talk a little bit about, what are some unhealthy habits that we can begin to notice in ourselves, and what are some healthy ones that we can develop or replace the unhealthy habits with?
I think personally, one knows when it's like a healthy habit, when you start to see, I don't want to say change, but when you start to see like you're feeling much better, like you're feeling yourself again. So some things that I like to do is like when I notice that I'm about to like outburst and start yelling and start having an attitude, I immediately just put on my running shoes and I go outside. I feel like, nature, there's such a high beauty in nature, being able to listen like to the birds chirp. And I'm very grateful I have a lake nearby. So just, seeing the ducks in the water, that's so soothing. And also something else that helps me is, so this might be an unhealthy coping mechanism, but so I like to yell, like I just yell out loud. But I know that, sometimes, let's say if my parents are home or family members, that might put them into distress. So I guess what works best for me is I either yell in a pillow or I cry to myself, or I just make sure nobody's at home. So, yeah.
And that's not unhealthy either.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, with coping strategies, to some extent, like you said, it's what works for you, what's making you feel good. I think when we think about unhealthy coping strategies, some of the really big ones that are really unhealthy would be the substance use, for example. People might turn to alcohol or drugs because they temporarily make you feel better. In the long term, it usually makes you feel a lot worse. But that's one of them, for example. Another one, is eating habits, for example. I'm not saying, getting a snack when you're upset is a problem, because I do that. Many people do. That's okay. It's, when you're, binge eating, for example, purging, some of those behaviors that we see with eating disorders, for example, maybe you're binge eating, but then you're exercising for hours or using laxatives or something so that, you know, your weight is going up and down significantly. You know, we're all in quarantine. We're probably spending not as much time being able to exercise, being able to do things. So, you know, weight fluctuations are typical. You know, stress eating is a very common thing. And I think, you know, when it reaches a point of, you know, actually having a significant impact on your body, so that it's unhealthy. And I think those physical things are really important, you know, in terms of healthy coping strategies. I think taking care of your body physically is really important. You know, exercising, we know, is really helpful for mental health. And that can look very different for everybody. It could be taking a walk outside. We know so many people are walking outside right now. And that exercise, as well as being outdoors, is really helpful. You know, other things, getting enough sleep is huge. And this can be really hard when you have anxiety. So sometimes, you know, what I do is I have a very important sleep hygiene routine. So for me, I have to make sure that I'm not on my phone right before I go to bed. If I'm not tired, if I'm, you know, need to stay up a little bit longer, I read a book or I do Sudoku or something that's not on staring at a screen. And then I listen to a meditation app every night. And for me, that's really helpful to have that routine, and it helps me sleep better at night. And I think that's really important because I know for me, when I don't sleep as well, I'm not feeling as well the next day either, physically, mentally, all of the above. And then I think, you know, everyone has things that they enjoy doing. I think, you know, sometimes we think of sitting on a couch watching TV as a bad thing if you're doing it for long periods of time. I think it can be really helpful for some people. Sometimes it's a good distraction. It's you know, a way to dive into a story of a movie or a TV show that you're watching. You know, you're relaxing your body. You know, maybe you don't want to do that all the time, but it could be useful for some people. You know, I personally love to dance. Had been, you know, trying to dance in my room, you know, when I need to, and finding those little things that you enjoy and making sure that you're taking time to do them is, for me, important, healthy coping strategy.
Yeah, I want to jump in and actually mention one really helpful coping habit, and that is mindfulness. And for me, when I first hear that word, I'm like, oh, that means I have to sit down and meditate. Honestly, I'm just not that kind of person, but mindfulness can be all sorts of things. So like you could even just go on a nature walk and listen to the birds chirp, or you can notice your breathing. It can be just little things you're doing throughout the day. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to do this coping strategy for this amount of time. It's something that you could even just build in as part of your day, as something you're doing regularly. And for me, I've even found that actually just really helps in general.
Yeah, I really appreciate your point on mindfulness. You know, it's important with habits. It's not always about judgment, and we can be kind to ourselves and understand, you know, difficulty and stress can lead to certain inclinations, but rather the awareness of it, right? Paying attention to how our body is reacting and what it's doing as a result, or pushing us to do as a result. Yeah, so, and the other thing I wanted to kind of just name, and feel free, anyone who wants to comment in terms of negative, you talked about a number of them, Megan. The other is self-harm, right? Punishing ourselves. That can be physical, which certainly would want to be there to kind of help our friends and folks who we may think will may be aware or watch for signs. But it could also be, you know, with, it's really common to think, you know, in a very work-oriented kind of mindset and a productive culture, to think that because I didn't accomplish XYZ task, I am not going to let myself sleep as much. I don't deserve the rest right now. I need to continue on and finish this thing. Whereas if you get the rest, you may be way more productive in a shorter amount of time to accomplish that task. But I just wanted to put it out there. It's much more common, really, to think of different ways we punish ourselves. Or, you know, I will not allow myself to have this treat or to spend this time with my family because I have not accomplished my goals in XYZ that I need to fulfill. Just, yeah, I wanted to kind of put that out there to destigmatize it. Again, it's far closer to home than we may think. Parents, you may find that your own children are having these struggles and you're not necessarily paying attention or even aware of that. So not to scare folks, but really to emphasize the importance of learning about what these signs are, how we can understand ourselves. And as we understand ourselves better, we're able to better provide for those around us.
And to the
Stacy, go ahead.
parents, if you do have kids out there struggling, your kid is no different than another kid who's not struggling. So please do not look at your child no differently. Do not say, oh, my child's gonna snap out of this and be okay. Like, please seek your child help. That's the best thing that you can do for your child.
I strongly want to emphasize is to reach out to that person who you think might be doing well. Because I know that from personal experiences, you know, when we see that, oh, you know, this person is very productive, this person has their life together, but internally they're the ones who are struggling the most. So I really, really urge everyone, if you have that friend, please reach out to them.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kheira. And I'll say, you know, to everyone who thinks that this person is doing fine, it ends up being a prison for that person, right? Because they have to kind of sustain and maintain this, whatever leadership role that they have, or, you know, perception that they've built up. So I appreciate that. So if anyone wants to add anything else on our mental health conversation, go ahead now. Otherwise, I'm going to transition us to our final question for the night. Okay, so I hope this was informative for folks. As we think about the weeks ahead and the challenges that do face us, I'd love to hear a final message of hope from everyone on our stream today. Anyone, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I think, you know, right now we're all feeling isolated and it's really easy to feel like we're alone. But I think, you know, just remembering we're all in this together. You know, we're not alone. We have each other. And if you are struggling mental health wise, you're not the only one, and there is help available. You just have to reach out for it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Megan, that, you know, you're not alone. And something I've been doing to help, maybe this might help anyone, is to take it hour by hour. You know that term that when people say take it day by day, but you don't know if you're going to make it at the end of the day. So take it hour by hour and celebrate after each hour, whether it's like eating ice cream or having a dance party. At the end of the day, that's about like 12 celebrations. So take it hour by hour, and definitely check out Our Minds Matter and This Is My Brave. They're doing awesome opportunities, awesome resources. So definitely check them out.
My hope is for anyone in our community, Northern Virginia and elsewhere, if you are struggling, I hope that you have the courage to seek help. You're not alone. And I mean, there's plenty of people out here that is being the voice for you. And just remember, like, you're never alone. There are so many people that is willing to walk right beside you, willing to help you through your struggles and help navigate in the right direction.
So I know this might seem kind of cliche, but I'm going to say that you are going to be okay, and we are going to get through this COVID-19 pandemic, no matter how long it takes, but there is always sun at the end or light at the end of a tunnel. And I think that's just a great analogy to use. Love quotes. So yeah, that's my statement.
Kim?
Oh, it's me next? All right. I mean, I sound like a broken record. I say it every week that we are gonna have to get through this together. It's a really tough time. And I think I like something that like Jada said before about like checking up on even the people that you believe to be like the strongest, or people you feel as if they're holding it together the most. Because oftentimes you may not know that they're the ones who may be going through it and stuff like that. So even people who you look at and be like, hey, that person would never, they're always cheering people up, they're always doing this. Make sure you check up on whoever you like. If they pop up in your head, send them a text. If you think about them, text them, tell them like, hey, I miss you. I want to see how you're doing. Just make sure that people know that you're in their minds and that you're thinking about them. Because I think oftentimes in this situation, especially, kind of feels as if like we're all in this alone. Because I mean, we're all at home and it kind of feels like we're very, very separated from one another. So making sure that we stay connected in this really trying time, because it's important that we all come out of this. And even though like we may not somehow like hopefully we may not get the disease itself, but we could easily become like different byproducts of this whole pandemic. So please make sure that we are all taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves. And also, I just wanted to point out, like when you guys were talking about the resources, the 30-minute consultation, I actually signed up for one. So I just want to put that out there, because even like people, there is the stigma. The one way to get rid of it is to just put yourself out there, explain to yourself, make yourself known, like, hey, I also suffer from like mental health issues and stuff like that. And that's okay. And making sure that people know that you're not alone. And even people that you may like see on like all these things, the people go through things all the time. And it's important that you don't feel as if that you yourself are alone.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'll have to hear from you about how that goes in our next stream. And, you know, I'll say this, I think this is an opportunity for us. Firstly, that uncertainty has now become our new normal. So to accept that new normal and rather than kind of allow fear to guide us, allow stress and anxiety to imprison us within ourselves, to set ourselves free by taking that step and to channel that anxiety and whatever feelings it may be into steps to self-improvement, to self-awareness, and to learning more about how to take care of ourselves and those around us. Knowledge is power. It's the age-old kind of phrase, and we can empower ourselves using it too. So with that, thank you all to our guests. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. As always, we will be live Thursdays and Sundays at 7 p.m. addressing various topics and providing you with the latest on what we can. So feel free to continue watching, and we will see you on Thursday.
Bye, everybody.